Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim Defede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim Defede. A happy Passover and a happy Easter to all. And on this Easter Sunday, I will be talking in a few moments to Miami Archbishop Thomas Wenski. And while having the Archbishop as a guest on this holiest of days may seem like an obvious choice, I will tell you the reason he wanted to come on today's show was in response to last week's Facing South Florida, where I highlighted the ongoing failure of Miami-Dade County elected officials to move forward and approve a plan to help the mentally ill in our community. As you may recall, last week we documented how the county has spent more than $50 million renovating the Miami Center for Mental Health and Recovery, a groundbreaking facility that would take mentally ill individuals out of the jail and move them into the center where they can receive comprehensive treatment and support. 2 years ago, 2 nonprofit groups were selected to operate the facility, while numerous local groups and agencies have pledged their support, including the Homeless Trust and Camilla's House. Funding for the first 2 years of the center is already in place, and yet the center remains empty, not helping anyone. There is plenty of blame to go around. Mayor Danielle Levine Cava and her staff have done a terrible job of advocating for the center. County jail officials, for instance, seem more interested in protecting their jobs and budgets than admitting the obvious, that they need help treating the mentally ill. Finally, though, last week on this show, Mayor Cava stated unequivocally she wants commissioners to approve the center and get it open.
We have a contract ready to go. We've been waiting for this to go forward, and it needs to go forward. We just can't delay any longer on something that was promised to the public and where we have a solid plan. Jim, I've said it repeatedly. I negotiated these deals. I want this deal to go forward. There should be no confusion any longer. We are not in a quandary. We have a legitimate proposal, and it needs to move forward.
The center, however, is now bogged down at the County Commission, with Chairman Anthony Rodriguez bouncing final approval for the center from one committee to another. So while the commission fails to act, a broken system remains where people with mental illnesses are arrested for homelessness or minor drug charges. They then sit in jail for weeks or months at a time before getting released and then rearrested a short time later. Miami-Dade Judge Steve Leifman has dedicated his life to finding a solution to this cruel and inhumane cycle of arrest and release and arrest again. Here is part of the conversation I had with him recently, where we discussed the commission's supposed concern over the cost of the center. Their concern seems to be that while you may have funding for the first 2 or 3 years of this project, that when you go beyond that, their concern is that this project will not save the county money and therefore cannot be funded in the future. That's a legitimate question, so let's address it.
And I agree. Look, I'm a taxpayer. I don't want my money wasted any more than anybody else should. But this is why it makes no sense. And it's on 2 levels. The county is spending right now about $570 million a year for its jail operation cost, of which almost 3/4 are going to people with mental illnesses, over $400 and something million. Even worse, and if you're really concerned about making sure that our tax dollars are being spent appropriately, over the last 5 years, the county on average has spent $57 million per year on overtime cost at the jail. And so it's legitimate probably that they have to spend that money because they're having such a hard time hiring corrections officers. So you have 2 choices. You can try to hire more corrections officers, or you can lower the number of people in jail to reduce your overtime burden. We have handed them a gift to be able to lower the number of people in jail. And so if you're really concerned about protecting our taxpayer dollars and looking out for our budget, then why wouldn't you be working harder to reduce the number of people in jail so you could reduce one of the largest burdens on the taxpayers in Dade County, and that's the jail.
And let's be clear about something. The funding is already in place for the first 2 years. All Judge Leifman is asking is to let him get the center open. And then over the next 2 years, we can see whether it works or not. But instead, commissioners keep dragging their feet. They have no problem spending taxpayer money on district parades and rodeos and World Cup parties, but when it comes to actually helping people who are suffering, well, that can just wait. Now, one of the biggest advocates for the center is Miami's Archbishop Thomas Wenski, and so even though it is Holy Week, he made time to talk to me about the center. I know you're an advocate for getting that program, getting that up and running, and opening that building. Why do you believe it's important?
Well, I've seen it. I've been on a tour of the place that Judge Lightman gave me now a couple of years ago, and his explanation of what the potential of that place to relieve the plight of the homeless that are cycled in and out of our jails. Because if somebody has a heart attack walking down the street, they call an ambulance and they take them to a hospital. But if you have a mental health crisis, they call the cops and they take you to jail, which is not a very efficient way of treating a health crisis, because mental illness is a health crisis. And Judge Lightman, who has been a judge for many, many years and has dealt with these issues over the years, has come up with a great program here that I think will save the county millions of dollars in what they're spending to house or warehouse mentally ill people in jail, which is not the appropriate setting for them. Save them money, but it also will save lives, because this will allow people to get the treatment that they really need, and treatment that can help stabilize them. And Judge will tell you that for the most part, we're talking about the same people. It's the same couple thousand people that are cycling in and out of these jails because of the lack of a facility that is waiting to be funded and waiting to open its doors.
You talk about how Judge Lightman has documented how this would save money. There are those on the county commission that try to dispute that try to suggest that maybe the financial savings wouldn't be as great, or that coming up and finding the money in future years could become difficult. But let's put the money aside. Is this just not if government isn't there to help those who are mentally ill, who are warehoused in our jails, what's the purpose of government?
That's true, and of course I think the money thing is that there's a lot of created self-interest around this money, because the jails, if they're spending less money on the mentally ill, they'll need less money, and maybe there's some created interests that are trying to protect that. It's like those for-profit prisons. There's no incentive to release people, to parole people, because if you do, you don't get the same amount of money coming in from the government to pay for your for-profit prison system. So I think we have to look at it from the common good, as you're suggesting. The common good says that this is a better solution for the mentally ill, and if it helps the mentally ill, it'll rebound to helping the entire community, the families of the mentally ill people, and ultimately the taxpayers who are on the bill for all this.
So what is your message to county commissioners who are slowing this process down?
I think they've slowed it down for several years already, and it's time to cut bait and fish. It's time to approve it, and if what they fear is true, they can address it in 3 or 4 years when their feared financial crisis will appear. If they go now, there is no financial crisis. There may never be a financial crisis that they're afraid of, and so rather than vote because of possible fears of what might happen in the future, deal with what you got now, and let's help these people and help our community, because having these people untreated and cycling in and out of prisons is not good for them. It's not good for the community.
Let's broaden out. This is Easter Sunday, and I know you'll be having a message, but this particular Easter Sunday comes at a time when the United States finds itself at war in Iran. We are seeing increased stress on families here at home when it comes to immigration crackdowns. the loss of temporary protective status for Haitians and Venezuelans and so many immigrants in our community. As you look at this Sunday, what is your message, as we are dealing with all of these things?
And in these days, I've had several messages from Palm Sunday. Tuesday, we had a Mass of Chrism with all the priests in the diocese. Thursday night is the Mass of the Last Supper, etc. And basically, I'm telling people, you can't look upon the crucified Christ without seeing him and the people that are being crucified today, and the innocent that are suffering today. And certainly there's a whole amount of suffering, and this community should be particularly sensitive to it, because Miami, we're surrounded by islands of pain. If you think about it, you got Haiti, you got Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and almost everybody in this community has some connection with one of those islands of pain. Our community now is experienced the highest number of ICE arrests in the country here in Florida, especially in South Florida. More than 80%, maybe 90% of these people have no criminal records. So these are people that are being arrested, people that are married. Some of them have U.S. citizen wives, some have children are U.S. citizens, people that are basically hardworking, and people that are filling jobs that are needed in this community. If you go around this community and you ask people in agriculture, you ask people in the hospitality industry, healthcare industry, construction industry, they'll all tell you we need those workers. So, I've been saying for several months now, that the president should pivot now. He also promises the best economy ever, and you're not going to have the best economy ever without having a workforce participation of immigrants, especially these immigrants that are in an irregular status, but that status should be addressed by Congress and offered a path to legal status. A enforcement only or deportation only approach it doesn't solve the issue totally. Deportation has always been part of immigration policy. It always will be, but it can't not be the only tool in the toolbox, as it were.
I'm curious as to your reaction when you heard the Pope recently talk about the war in Iran and talk about the fact that those who pray in a manner that seems to suggest God wants a steady hand on the trigger, that God is sort of somehow to be found in the warrior ethos that kill to kill others. And he's spoken out on this, and it seemed very much directed at what the U.S. has been doing. I'm just curious as to, that caught a lot of attention, but it shouldn't really have surprised people that was part of the Pope's message, should it?
No, I think we expect the Pope to be a peacemaker, and every Easter he sends out a message to the city and to the world at Christmas time as well, in which he calls for greater dialogue, greater peace, greater cooperation among people. We need that voice in our world to help calm the other less erratic spirits that we have within us. So we need to listen to our better angels, and the Pope is inviting us to do so. And it's certainly totally coherent with the Passover and Easter celebrations we are observing, whether Catholics or Christians or Jews. Passover is about the Passover from slavery into the freedom of the Promised Land. And as Christians, we see Jesus's passion, death, and resurrection as his Passover from death to life, and we participate in that Passover through our baptism and through our following his steps, which are always seeking reconciliation, peace, and unity, rather than further disruption, violence, and and hatred.
Bishop Wenski, I appreciate your time. I know how busy this is. I just want to clarify one thing, because there may be some confusion from people who saw that you had submitted a letter of retirement to the Pope. That was pro forma, as you've explained, that it's something that you're required to do when you're 75, but your intention, your hope is to remain Archbishop for a while longer, correct?
Well, every bishop, when he reaches 75, sends a letter to the Pope offering the resignation. The Pope can act on it when he wants to. Basically, the answer I got is hang on there for the while, stay the course for the time being. So whether that time being is another year or 2 or 3 years, that depends on the Pope, but it also depends on my own health and energy. But I think I'm pretty tough guy, so we got a lot more to give, I think.
Well, we're grateful for you to be here, and thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you, Jim.
When we come back, the voices of sexual assault victims are being heard in ways we've never seen before. We'll talk to a victim when we return. Stay with us.